Let us be in the spirit of prayer. Gracious and loving God, in these words that I share, may they honor you and glorify you. May they challenge us. May they nourish us. And may they feed us. In your holy and blessed name we pray. Amen. As part of Jeffrey's ongoing summer sermon series, Remembering Her, talking about women in the Bible, I get to share this wonderful and beautiful book with you. The Song of Songs, or also known as the Song of Solomon. And not only is this book one of the most beautiful books in the Bible, it's also considered to be one of the most controversial books in the Bible. Now, you heard a few of the passages that Donna read, but if you read the entire book, it's filled with erotic and passionate imagery and language. And another reason that this is controversial is that the authorship of the book, while attributed to Solomon, because Solomon's mentioned in the book of Scripture, and because he had all of these wonderful wives and, girlfriends, he was considered to be this romantic above romantics. But yet, the reality is that authors or scholars today understand that there has been no definite proof that this was a book written by King Solomon. And so, in most understandings today, the author remains unknown. And the other reason that it's somewhat controversial is that there are a lot of different understandings. There are the ancient understandings of the Jewish rabbis that it's God's symbolizes, it's an allegorical symbolization of God's love for the church, God's love for the people of Israel. In its Christian allegorical interpretation, it's Christ's love for the church and the individual soul. And then more recently, some other studies in some churches a little more conservative than ours, it's got teachings on human love and sexuality between men and women. And yet, if you go back, this language goes back even farther because it's found in ancient Mesopotamia in wedding liturgy that the ancient Mesopotamians used in their wedding rites. And then if you go a little bit later, in the early 19th century, it's found in Palestinian Arab wedding language. So you see there's a real enormous history to this book of Scripture. In 2008, I had the privilege of attending a workshop hosted by Phillips Theological Seminary. It's a seminary that's affiliated with Texas Christian University and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And the theme for this 2-week workshop was preaching the Psalms and preaching the Song of Solomon. And the parts of the workshop were led by very distinguished theology professors. One older, one younger. And the young woman who led the piece about the Song of Songs, or I'm going to call it the song here, had just recently completed her doctorate, and her doctoral thesis was on the Song of Songs. And it was a fascinating opportunity to hear experts talk about what this book meant. And for some of our older clergy in attendance at this workshop, and there were 300 of us, some far more experienced in theology than I am, For some of the older folks, it was a challenge because they had grown up in their culture understanding that the voice of God in this allegory was the male voice. Was Solomon. And yet the young woman, Laura was her name, was talking about in her understanding, in her work, the voice of God was female, was woman. And that's the position that I'm going to take here today. The other part that I learned that was kind of interesting is that almost all of these clergy that were at this workshop, 90% of them would rather preach anything than on the Song of Solomon. They didn't want to get into this erotic language and have to try to explain all these emotions that were going on. They would rather do anything else. But let's look for a minute at this relationship in the song. All these beautiful words of beloved lovers talking to each other and sharing their thoughts with one another. It's like you're seeing a relationship between a young woman and a young man, and the young woman's parents don't recognize this relationship. This couple can't be out in the open with their love and desire for each other. He desires desperately to hold her in his arms, and she desperately desires to be held in his arms and to want to be together. And that's what makes this beautiful allegory so wonderful, because the perspective exists that we are human beings, and that as human beings, we understand physical love. We can imagine the young woman's desire to be with her love. We can remember perhaps ourselves meeting that person that we wanted to be close to. Maybe we can remember the emotions that that physical reaction held for us. The first caress. Looking to each other's eyes. A first hug. Holding hands. That first kiss. We may have been weak-kneed or shaky. We may have felt our heartbeats pound in our chest. We may have felt our temperature rise and our breathing become faster and faster. Now I'm going to be pushing that allegory a little bit, but now imagine the young woman in the song as a loving God or a loving Christ, desperately wanting to be with us, her children. She wants to give us love, great love, a love so strong that Christ was a result of that love, that God sent love, Christ, to be with us. And then Christ's love for us to teach us better ways to live with one another. With teachings like, love God with all your heart, your mind, your body, your soul, and your spirit. Love your neighbor as you love yourselves. Or don't judge others lest you're going to be judged. Or let the person free of sin cast you the first stone as he rescued the woman about to be stoned. And most of us, in thinking about scriptures, can think of many more than we've heard and read and experienced. Now imagine if we reciprocate this love back with the same kind of love and passion and joy that the young man has for his wife, the woman has for her boyfriend, and we reach out to love God with that same energy and passion and desire to do more in the world. And let's take that image a little bit farther, because in loving that much, we're called to be faithful to Christ. What if we reach out and love each other the same way? Not passion love or romantic love, but passion in our souls, passion in our spirits to do wonderful things. What if we always seek to love each other and work for justice and peace? What could this love, what could this world be like? And I was doing some online research because I like to go in and read some of what some of our bloggers and New Age thinkers and people write about different passages in Scripture. And there was a wonderful blog that I found about the Song of Songs, written by Craig Adams. And it points out to the fact that one of the reasons this idea of love is so strong is that because each of us, as human beings, has an innate desire to be loved for who we are. To be loved not for what we can be changed into, but for ourselves. Nourished and fed and empowered to be ourselves. And he goes on to point out that this is what makes intimate relationships work, regardless of who they're with. And goes on to say that when we no longer feel loved and valued for ourselves, that relationship may not feel as good or as comfortable. And sometimes relationships when people don't feel valued in. Most of us would never choose to hurt someone that we carry that deeply about. We want to do all we can to nurture them and prop them up. Yet we do know, as sad as it is, that relationships do fail. And they fail because we are human beings. We're imperfect people. We have flaws and warts and different aspects of our personalities that sometimes we can't bring into alignment with what we feel about someone else. And we may let the other person or let God down. But this is where God's love also comes to us in the form of grace and forgiveness. And Christ taught us the way that we offer grace to one another. And we've seen this kind of love for each other play out on TV news this whole entire past week as we've watched the coverage of Hurricane Harvey in Texas. We've seen folks who had no knowledge of who some people were, rescue people trapped in cities like Corpus Christi or Houston or Beaumont, Texas, or Port Arthur. We've seen Muslim communities open their Muslim worship centers to Christians and Jews. We've seen Christian churches open up their sanctuaries and their places to Muslims, to Jews, to people of all stripes, all colors, all nationalities. They're rescuing people. They don't care who someone is. You need help, they step up and they help you. It shouldn't take Hurricane Harvey or a disaster like 9/11 for us to be able to reach out and love one another. That should be part of who we are. And there will always be opportunities. We don't have to wait for a major disaster to touch someone else's life. We can always reach out to one another. But the sad part is that sometimes we become caught up in the negativity of events happening around us. It's easy to pick up the paper or go online, the news on social media, or read comments on social media and see how much negativity there is instead of passion and love for one another. One of my dear friends, who's also a clergy colleague, her name is Renita Eidenshank, and she's a pastor with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And she was reflecting on this theme not long ago and posted some thoughts on Facebook, which she has given me permission to share. And I hope that as I share them here briefly, that you'll understand and feel them as deeply as they touched me. But see, I had a chance to see Renita's compassion. She was the minister that took care of my son's family when my grandson was killed in 2011. And she reached out to family, to friends, to young people with a heart of compassion that deeply touched all of us. She invited me to do something very challenging to help celebrate my grandson's life. And she walked with me in that journey as I took on that role. And so her words mean a great deal. So I want to share what she's written. Guys, that poor woman in Fargo who was over the moon, full of joy to meet her baby, her parents, her beloved. Texas, those elders sitting in floodwaters, people posting on social media, begging for help. North Korea, and missiles. Bipartisan politics. Hate groups. The air is so heavy with sin and hurt and forces wildly out of control. It's time to stop. Breathe. Remember the miracle of blood pumping to the tip top of your head and to the little itty bitty soles on the bottom of your feet. Try a double dose of what brings you joy. The wind gently swaying the corn in the fields. The faint whiff of manure in the air. Giggling children. The deliciousness of chocolate. A line and hook in the water. Remember the goodness that God sneaks into every nook and cranny. Stop. Breathe. Do. Be God's goodness and graciousness in this world for someone else to drink in. Donate money to those in Texas or a stranger's GoFundMe page. The woman's baby in Fargo. God only knows they need it. Go do some work for a veteran and their spouse, people who have known the horrors of war on the front lines and back at home. Visit them, him or her, in the nursing home. Bring cookies. Mow their lawn. Stop people in their tracks when they tell a joke that puts one of God's people down based on race or country. Enough already. Your Abba is listening. Reach out to someone you don't understand or agree with. Share a cold drink or a hot cup of coffee. Talking about what you mutually love. Stop. Breathe. Get grounded. Do. This, my friends, is love. Reaching out, touching others, propping people up, nourishing, and living with the passion of God in your hearts. May it always be so. Amen.